Welcome to Faith Chats, where our topic is always about faith, family, freedom, and America. Today, my guest is known as one of the greatest Christian radio DJs of all time, my great friend Brian Mason. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Andrew. And if I need a PR guy, I'm calling you. That was a nice introduction. Thank you.
Well, Brian, I'm very excited to have you here today. Won't you share with us a little bit about your background, about how you got involved in Christian radio?
Well, I came to Nashville in 1973 and worked in radio starting in '74 in rock and roll. I was a top 40 DJ in Nashville and worked at a country station and a adult contemporary station, and always loved Christian music. And I've been a believer since a young child. The contemporary Christian music industry had not really started yet, so I was very fortunate to get in pretty much when it started here in Nashville. And the FM adult contemporary station I was working for was WSM FM, a huge station here in town. They were running a syndicated show called Heavy Light, and it was a half-hour show, and it featured a lot of what was then contemporary Christian music, the early stuff. It was, David Meese and just some of the artists, Love Song, and some other people that were around in those early days. And that show was going away. They were retiring that show, and the program director asked me if I would like to start doing a show there locally. And I said, yes, I would love to. So I started on May the 4th, 1980, started hosting that show. And it expanded from a half-hour show to an hour, the 2 hours to 3 hours. At one time, we were 6 hours, which was pretty much killing me. But we settled in on a 4 hour show. I was on three different stations and moved because the other stations changed formats, and but always on a secular station. It was really a wonderful thing that the mainstream local AC adult contemporary stations wanted to have that Christian music content on their stations on Sunday mornings. And so I felt very fortunate to do that. The show ran for 31 years, and we retired the show in June of 2011. And so that's a brief history.
So, as you mentioned, you work for a rock and roll station, country music. What really made you decide to pick Christian music?
It would be a real easy cliche for me to say I didn't pick it, Andrew. It picked me. That would be an easy thing to say. I was going to a church in Nashville where a lot of the Christian music artists, even though the radio industry had not fully developed and it was not, what it is today, I was hanging out with a lot of artists and was loving what they were doing. And I also attended a bookstore in Nashville called Koinonia Bookstore. And a lot of these artists were performing there on a regular basis, or when they passed through town, they would perform at Koinonia Bookstore and Coffee House. And so, like I said, when the opportunity came to do it, I was already, my heart was already there. So it was a very easy decision, and it made me realize that all the stuff I had done before was really just preparation to do what I ended up doing.
So, share with us the initial vision and how you were led to start the Brian Mason Show.
Well, I I always wanted to keep it. I'm going to use the word sonically, sounding like what and again, these are secular stations that I'm on, and I didn't want to change the station sound so much. I didn't play, the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, or we didn't play black gospel or southern gospel or other very fine forms of gospel music. I stayed with a contemporary sound because I needed to stay in line sonically with what the station was doing during the week, and that was the main thought. The other thing was realizing that a lot of people were listening to the station, whatever it was, at whatever secular station that was, the night before, and their alarm clocks were coming on Sunday morning, and so they would listen, tune in to us, maybe accidentally. And so I uh, always made it a goal of not being preachy, not speaking a lot of Christianese, letting the music do the speaking. And in artist interviews that I did, and out of the month, I probably had an artist in 3 out of the 4 Sundays of a month. Let them tell their stories, tell the stories of writing the songs and that kind of stuff. And so, again, me staying kind of out of the picture, just be the warm, lovable host that I could be, but not preaching, talking down to people. And I found that being a whole lot more attractive. And the other thing too that I think is very infectious is laughter. We when I would get the artist in, we would enjoy laughter, and I think that people are drawn in by that kind of thing. And it's not that we would fake laughter, but we would genuinely have people on that were funny, and we would highlight that.
So, who were some of the memorable guests that you featured on the Brian Mason show?
Well, the first guest I had was the first live guest, because I think the first recorded guest I had was B.J. Thomas. Recorded that interview and edited it up. But Gary Chapman was the very first, and he was probably also the most frequent. Um, Even in the height of his popularity, when he was doing a syndicated radio show and also primetime country for the Nashville network, and was heavily involved in that television career that he had, he still took the time to come and do the show, and or at least call in. Even when I didn't invite him to, he would just call in and and tell a story, tell what was going on, and it was always very entertaining. In fact, when I would ask the artists what were the best guests that you can remember, it was always Gary Chapman on top of that list. But also Phil Kagi, incredible guitar player. He would come, and I can only think of one time that he came in and didn't bring his guitar. He came in and shared live music, sometimes sharing music he had just written on the show. But so those are, and again, we're now 2011's a long time back. There were a lot of people that maybe aren't coming to mind. Oh, memorable. Pat Boone. I always wanted Pat Boone as a child. I loved Pat Boone, and he would come to Nashville to visit. So this is where he grew up, and so he would. I finally got him to agree to come and do the show. Really glad about that. I had Noel Paul Stookey from Peter, Paul, and Mary. That was the first album I ever bought. I had Noel on the show. Also, Jim Caviezel, who played Jesus in The Passion of the Christ, he came and did the show. He was in town and did the show. So there were a number of memorable people. Carmen did the show. I'm just kind of throwing them out as I'm thinking of them, but it was a wonderful thing.
So, if you had the chance to pick one episode that you would want people to listen to today, what episode would that be?
Andrew, I don't think I could do that. It's nothing stands out as the moment of, wow, this is the best show ever. Um, Go back to Phil Kagi. He and Chuck Girard, who recently passed away from Love Song,
Yeah.
and Tommy Coombs, who I had never met before that morning. They came and did the show, and Phil, of course, playing his guitar, he just broke into one of his classic iconic songs, "What a Day." He started playing it on the air with Tommy and Chuck joining in and doing harmonies with him. And then Phil broke right into Little Country Church, which was like the first big hit of Love Song. And so the three of them, it's just a little impromptu concert. And it's just one of those videos, because I've got that on video on YouTube, that I go back and watch every now and then, because it was just so enjoyable to see these men who God had gifted so richly with music, that gift that comes to us, and see them enjoying sharing what they did and what they do.
So, you were inducted into the Tennessee Radio Hall of Fame. Congratulations to you on that.
Thank you.
The class of 2025. Share with us what your initial reaction was when you got that phone call that you were being inducted.
Well, keeping in mind, and I didn't really realize this when somebody mentioned it to me after I was inducted. I keep in mind, except for a short period, maybe around a year in the mid 70s, I've only been part-time in radio. The Christian music show was on Sunday mornings only, and I was just a part-time, staff employee kind of a person with the radio stations. And so it really surprised me when I got the phone call that they said you're being inducted. I was grateful. I was just very humbled and grateful. Um, it was yeah, it was a cool surprise.
So even though you retired the show, you still hang out with a bunch of the guys called old CCM dudes. Tell us a little bit
Yes.
about this.
Yeah, about a year after, sometime in late 2011, um, I just started missing my old friends. I hadn't seen Chuck Gerard in a while. I hadn't seen Keggy in a while. I hadn't seen Tim and Steve Archer. I hadn't seen, just a number of people that I hadn't spent time with. And so I emailed all the guys that I had in my email list of them, and I said, "Hey, would you guys like to get together and have lunch?" And they said, "Yeah, let's do it." So we went to this really nice, very rustic log cabin, large place called Sportsman's Lodge in the Brentwood area, in the Nashville area. And we had a lunch, and I think there were probably 15 guys there that day. And I said, and we ate in the regular part of the restaurant. There is a back room that was like, someday we're going back there. Um, and I said, would you guys like to do this again? Hoping that they'd say yes. And I said, well, what do you think? You want to do this on like an annual basis, or, twice a year, or maybe quarterly? And they decided, no, let's do this monthly. And so since January of 2013, we have met every month for lunch. And sometimes, I mean, around COVID time, we couldn't meet. There was probably 3 months that we didn't meet, and we've had a couple of snow days in February that we've had to call off the lunch. So there've been a few exceptions. And sometimes, after COVID, guys were a little cautious about getting back into things, and so we had maybe 8 guys show up. But here recently, we've had just about 30 people showing up for lunches, and it's wonderful, and it's grown more guys, and it's all guys. I don't mean to be sexist or anything, but there's just there's a safeness, Andrew, about that gathering. Men share stuff that's going on in their lives, maybe with their families, prayer requests that we don't talk about anyplace else. It stays in that room, and we pray for each other, and kind of cover each other in that. And it's just a safe place to be. And so that's part of what the function of the group is, to provide that safe place. Now, once a year or so, we do invite the wives and female Christian artists and stuff to join us. A couple of years ago, we had Buck and Annie Herring from Second Chapter of Acts. They were in town. In fact, I did an interview with them, a video interview with them, and they came and joined us that Wednesday for a lunch, and and we invited the wives and the ladies of Christian music, and it was a pretty full place, but it was pretty wonderful. Another one we had just last October, I think. Victoria Jackson was on Saturday Night Live. And incidentally, she's from the same hometown I'm from. I didn't know her in those days, but we're from Hialeah, Florida, a city inside Miami. And but we became acquainted. She did my show a couple of times, and she was going through some stuff. And I emailed her and I said, "Hey, would you and your husband Paul, who, by the way, Paul's father was my pediatrician when I was growing up. I didn't know Paul; he's a bit younger than I am, but anyway, it was just kind of a wonderful connections to have all these years later." But she and Paul, her husband, came, and again we invited the ladies, and that was a pretty full crowd too. And yeah, so it's and another thing that I really love about the dudes that we've started doing again, we did it sporadically years ago. Morgan Cryer, great Christian music artist, good writer, singer songwriter. He said, once in a while we video singing happy birthday for somebody, and we video it and send it to him and stuff. He goes, "What do you think about singing a hymn at the lunch?" And I said, "That's brilliant. Yes, do it. Take care of that." So we started singing hymns. We got away from it after a while, but we started it up again. In fact, Pat Boone was with us last June, and we started it back up at that point. And every time since then, we've sung together. And It's just a wonderful. It's just I don't know how to explain it. It's a wonderful gathering of believers.
So, all of us radio broadcasters have that pinch yourself moment when you meet an artist that you never thought you'd have the chance to meet. Who would be that one for you?
Oh, again, there were many nights that I had trouble getting to sleep on Saturday night because I was so excited. And that was a lot of Saturday nights that I had trouble getting to sleep. But sometimes I was a huge Glenn Campbell fan, and he came and did the show. Only he was only there. It's funny. He was only there for about 20 or 30 seconds. His plane landed late, and I had to go off the air. And in fact, I was saying goodbye to the audience on mic, and he came running into the studio, and I had about 20 seconds to thank him for being there. Will you come back? And he said, I sure will. It was just great. It was wonderful, and we had a few minutes afterwards to spend some time together. But that was one of the ones that I just so much look forward to seeing. But so many of these brothers and sisters, it was exciting to hear their stories and see what they were doing live, in their lives and their concerts and the ministries that they had. It was just exciting to spend time, pretty much with all of them.
And you know as well as I do, as I mentor a couple of young people that have asked me about podcasting, radio broadcasting goes so much deeper than just a list of questions. It's more about learning more about them, but forming that relationship, that friendship. And it's
Yes.
about the art of conversation. And, I recently told one of the kids that I was mentoring, it's not about a list of 10 questions, it's about the conversation. If you can construct the conversation, that person's going to want to come back to your program.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. And at the same time, Andrew, I'll continue that sentence. And the listeners will be feel more invited to listen in if it is a conversation like you and I are having right now. If all you were saying was, okay, tell us about, and you're reading from a list, tell us about this, and then I'll give you the answer. And then you said, okay, now tell us about this. That's not really a conversation. You're just reading a bunch of questions to me, and it's not the same thing. But conversation um, is inviting, and it does invite the listener if the conversation is genuine. If there's a true connection there, it is a good thing.
So, being a Radio Hall of Fame member, for the aspiring podcaster that may be watching this conversation that really wants to maximize their podcast in Christian music, what advice could you give them?
I would say make sure you're called. It's the same advice that sometimes I would be asked by a young aspiring, DJ and podcaster could be interchanged these days. But sometimes people who wanted to get into the Christian music industry as an artist, how can I become an artist? And I would hear what other artists would say to them, and I would, add my own. Yes, that's very good. Don't assume that because you can sing in the shower and you think you sound pretty good, that you need to go on the road. It's a hard calling on your life, and so many are not made for it. I would say podcasts the same thing. If you've got a gift to do it, it'll be pretty evident. If you don't have a gift, it'll be pretty evident in that you just won't have the followers. People won't gravitate to you like you hope that they would, because you're offering something that you think that they want. If you're not as personable, hard to say, but if you can't pull it off, then you're not going to draw people in, because there is so much vying for our attention these days. So many television channels and other podcasts and other things that are out there that are trying to pull us away and take our attention away. And so if you want to do a podcast about your faith or other people's faith or whatever, make sure it's unique enough that somebody is going to, that the listener is going to say, I can't miss this. I don't want to miss this, because I'm always going to learn something.
So, who would be an artist that, well, you've already shared Glenn Campbell was one that you met, but what about a Christian music artist that you've met that really made you pinch yourself?
Well, Glenn, of course, became a very strong believer. Was doing Christian albums by the time that I met him. In fact, I can't think of any non-Christian that I ever had on the show that I interviewed on the show. Um, I don't know, Andrew. Once in a while I would have a book author on, but to be honest with you, I can't think of one of them right offhand because I always wanted to stay focused on music and what the music was doing for people. I might have an artist on as a favor, but say, hey, you want me to have this person on, the Christian music artist, say, hey, would you interview my friend? Yes, I will, if you'll come in with them and do the interview. So I had my Christian artist friend and their friend, the book author or whatever, and we could, draw it in that way. Um, but I can't think of any because again there were so many over 1,000 interviews that we did over that 31-year period. I can't really think of one.
Wow, that's amazing. And it seems like I'm sure you've had many memorable experiences as you shared. Are your episodes available anywhere for people to live stream?
Some of them are, and I should have come prepared for that. But I've got a YouTube channel. I can't. The one with the interviews with Buck and Annie Herring, and also Matthew Ward as a separate interview from second chapter of Acts, and also did an interview with a group called Dogwood, who was big in Texas, but they were really from here, from West Virginia, but they came to Nashville and so emanated from here. They were part of the roots of contemporary Christian music, and really, I could do a whole hour on talking about how important Dogwood was to the contemporary Christian music industry. But Steve Chapman, Ron Elder, and Steve's wife Annie, Steve and Annie, who later went out on their own, did an interview with them, and also Chuck Girard did a couple hours with Chuck, and also a guy named Ken Mansfield, who I also was a big fan of. Ken, I don't know if you are aware of Ken or not. He died a few years ago. He worked for Capitol Records in the mid 1960s, and uh, anyway, he worked with the Beatles.
Wow.
And when they formed Apple Records in 1968, they handpicked him to head up Apple Records in the United States. So it's a pretty heady thing right there. So people like me who were, born in the 50s, raised in the 60s and stuff, and who are huge Beatle fans, there's my drumhead right there. Um, that it was a huge thing to meet him. Later in his life, the Lord ran him down, and he became a very strong believer and started touring and speaking. Um, Friendship with him was wonderful. In fact, I ended up doing a podcast with him. Um, Amazing stories, but were about obviously great Beatles stories, but also stories about his faith and what God did in his life in very powerful ways. Um, I just lost track. What was your question?
So, as 2026 is quickly approaching, is there any future aspirations of a podcast or anything coming up for you?
Yeah, we are looking to maybe continue more of those video podcasts. I've got a I've got an incredible resource with the old CCM dudes. Again, Gary Chapman and Phil Kagi and Bob Farrell from Farrell and Farrell and Bruce Carroll and just a number of the guys. I could go down the list and go, these would be fabulous interviews that I would love to do. And it's just a matter of finding the facility now and making that happen. But yeah, I'm open. I'm definitely open to it, and would love to if the Lord allows. I'm ready.
Well, Brian, I have enjoyed this time with you. Thank you so much for your time. And I encourage people to find you on YouTube and stream your podcast and check out the great artists that you've had there. Thank you for your time.
Andrew, thank you so much. Good to be with you.
All right.